Hello, everyone. How are you all doing? Welcome to the last day of our workshop with PubGeek and SNO. I'm very happy to host you. Today, we'll continue the topic that we left off yesterday, unfortunately, which would be how to actually write a paper. And then I'll move forward to a couple of things like how you can efficiently and quickly read your paper. We touch a little on statistics as well as the ethics committee approval, but since we have kind of a deadline at 8 because I have my duty at 8 again at NSCI. So I've got someone to cover for me till 8:30. But I'll have to leave home at 8 so that I'm there by 8:30. Um, so yeah, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being part of these 5 days. It's really been an honor and a pleasure to teach you all, to learn from you all, and just all the messages that I've received over the past 5 days have just been overwhelming. So let's start today's topic, which is how you can effectively write a paper, right?
Hello.
Hello.
Sir, we are audible?
Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, sure. We can start, or we need to
Yeah.
wait till 6?
No, we start. We said we would start earlier, right? So we just
Yeah.
start. Let people come and go as they please. Right?
Okay, we are leaving a message on the groups to join in bit
Please join. We're
earlier.
starting
Yeah.
now. फिर जिसको
Okay.
आना पड़ेगा.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so let's start today's session. Let me just find a way to share this with you guys. And yep, oops, yeah, here we go. So basically today's first talk is going to be on the fundamentals of manuscript preparation, right? So before we move on to that, we're going to talk about how articles are actually evaluated by the journals that you submit them to. So everyone had a lot of questions about the whole peer review process and how it's actually conducted, right? So we are going to talk about how articles are evaluated. So you must have seen a lot of journals and they say submit article now, and you might be wondering what exactly happens once you submit an article. What happens, why is it rejected or why is it accepted to a particular journal? So once you submit your manuscript, the journal performs its initial checks, right? And that's the whole preprint question that everyone was talking about. Once they perform their initial checks, which means that your article is a little scientifically sound and it is worthy of reviewers actually going through this article. The editor decides all this, of course. The editor in chief um, of that particular journal will decide these things. And once they decide that yes, it meets the format which is required by the journal, then they will post your preprint, right? Some journals don't even post preprints, but the ones that do follow this. Then there is something called a peer review. So peer, the word peer means a colleague or someone who is working in the same field, right? A peer, like your fellow medical students will be your peers, right? So peer review basically means people who are working in that field, your peers, will be evaluating it, right? Or essentially reviewing it. So then the editor sends it to different reviewers that are already part of they have their own reviewers that they invite to particular journals, and then they'll be sent for that. Then once the reviewers give you, so then either, like I said yesterday, we discussed this, I'm just going to touch on a little bit, is the peers will then either tell you, okay, your article is good enough for publishing, which rarely ever happens. And the other thing they can tell you is, no, it's absolutely horrendous, we're not going to publish this. Or another third thing that they can tell you is, okay, edit these things for us. And most of the times it's usually some grammatical mistakes that you made, and sometimes they really have major revisions and minor revisions, right? So major revisions is something like changing the statistical plan that you use, changing the test, how it's not valid, or changing the particular discussion. Like suppose you said salt decreases hypertension, and then you've derived something completely different from it, that people should completely stop eating salt in their households and stuff like that. So those are essentially called major revisions, where they're actually editing a major part of your interpretation or your results or your findings, or they're asking you ki, you've got too much numerical data in your article, convert it to tables, convert it to figures, so that's easier for us to read, easier for us to evaluate, right? So that can happen in the peer review process. But even if you edit that, there's no guarantee that you'll that article will be published in that journal. Okay. When that's done, then there'll be final journal checks and production. The journal will show you exactly what your article is going to look like in that journal, and then you can publish it, right? So just to talk about the recent trends in the articles that have actually been published in journals. This is data received from a series directory, essentially, where you can see the number of articles, the total number of journals that are present have increased from 20,000 to almost 30,000 in the last 10 years, which means almost a 50% increase in the last 10 years, right? Now, are all these journals authentic? Are so many journals published in PubMed? No, right? So you have to be very careful about where you choose to publish it, because if you use like something called a fuzzy journal, right, then your reputation will be on the line, and you really don't want to do that just to get one article published, because then if you're really interested in research during your whole career, you'll really end up publishing a lot of articles, and just one article, even if it's your first article, won't matter where it's published, right? So just make sure that you try, like, yes, the other day Dr. Parag Damne says, try for the best journals that's within your reach, then move down the ladder. Okay, don't start with, okay, acha ye fatafat ho raha hai. Like, don't go for time saving techniques. Okay, so again, another stat by the Elsevier publishing house is that 30 to 60% of all articles that are received by Elsevier journals are rejected by editors directly, right? So like I said, first your article goes to the editor, then it goes for the peer review. But 30 to 60% of the cases, the editors don't even send it forward for peer review, right? And they just reject it outright, because either it's not met the journal guidelines, or like the format in which the journal wants. Some people just want certain limited words. Some people want your abstract to be a certain way, structured abstract, unstructured, structured abstract, etc. Or you just haven't read the aim or the scope of the journal. Like suppose it's a hepatology journal, right? And you submit say a renal finding, like, or something like that. No, it won't be that gross, but something along those lines, then obviously your article is going to be rejected, right? This is something really gross, but there are certain minutiae that you really need to take care of before you submit to a journal, because it's a long process and you cannot submit to another journal at the same time. So make sure that you're submitting to the right journal, okay? Because otherwise your time will only be wasted, okay? So yeah, so 12.6 million articles are available in Elsevier, and 365,000 articles are accepted each year, right? So it's still a lot of articles that are accepted, but although just remember that 30 to 60% are rejected by the editors themselves. And editors will also take a week or two um, to give you an answer that, okay, hey, you just don't meet our guidelines, we're not going to send it for peer review more, and it's just going to be rejected. Okay, so make sure that you submit it to a good journal, or a journal that you really want, after reading all the instructions for authors that they have on their webpage. Okay, what is peer review? Again, we spoke about peer review, but just a little history on it. The philosophical transactions of the Royal Society, that was the first journal in 1618, which is the 17th century, that they in fact came up with this term peer review, and that was the first journal to have peer review, right? So it's an old established way of doing things, where the experts will tell you whether or not your article is worth others to read. There are two sides of this argument. Some people say that they just won't accept articles that are by medical students if they see your name, but usually it's blinded, which means that once it goes through the editor phase, the reviewers will not know your name, your institution, what year, or anything like that. So it's blinded. So the review you're getting from them is completely honest. They're not ki chodo ye to medical student hai, iska accept nahi kar. So that will not be the case, right? The editor, however, can see your credentials, but usually editors don't care about those unless you've really made gross mistakes in your journals, or sorry, in your articles. Journals won't outright reject them. Okay. So like we spoke in detail, editor receives the paper editor checks and to see if it fits the journal's aims and scope. Then editor himself selects 2-3 reviewers and sends them the paper. The reviewers review the paper, provide any comments or suggestions or recommendations. They have actually, so I have reviewed a few articles. I don't know how they got a hold of me because I'm not really an expert in this, but the Indian Association of Pediatrics Journal has approached me for two journals that 2 articles that they asked me to review, and I've told them multiple times that, hey, I'm like a medical student, and do you really want me to review these? And you're like, yeah, sure. I mean, you have some papers in orthopedics and stuff, so whatever. I have reviewed them, and actually at the end there is an option saying suggestion, reject, revise, or accept, right? So you make sure it's easy for the reviewer to read, and it's easy for the reviewer to read so that he's not irritated. See, a reviewer is going to be a consultant, or he's going to be a faculty in an educational institute, and he's not going to spend too much time on this review thinking, Acha, wow, let's just read this properly. It's like an exam paper that we write, right? We focus on making it with good handwriting. We focus on making it with, bullet points up ahead. So make sure that just like your LAQ, your article is really easy to read. Okay. So now that you understood how your final article is going to be evaluated, we can move on to discussing how you should prepare that article to decrease your chances of rejection. Okay. So obviously following this guideline does not mean that every journal you submit to will accept your article, but it does mean that it substantially decreases your chances just by following a few, rules of research article writing. Okay. So there are 2 things that once you have made your paper, you either say it's not ready, that the work has no scientific interest, right? So although you've completed your research, you may find out that it's outdated work, or already multiple duplications of this particular work have been published, or there are incorrect conclusions just because of the errors we spoke about yesterday. We spoke about the data management errors. We spoke about the errors at source, where someone's weight is 50 kgs and someone is writing it as 30, or the handwriting is bad and you're interpreting it as 30 or stuff. So if those are the things that are there, don't waste your time too much. Don't get, a sad heart by just, publishing. I mean, submitting to the journals, because most of the time it may not be accepted, right? When it's ready, when your results are original, when you know that there's going to be some enhancement of this published work, like people are going to read it, they're going to be interested by it, or it's an up-to-date review. So review articles are not something I suggest first-time writers to write, because they have to go through something called a Prisma checklist, and usually review articles they don't accept by someone who's not an expert, and most big journals ask experts to write these review articles. So I've been fortunate enough to be included in some through Dr. Neil, but usually it's not something I recommend because it's a lot of hard work and you may not reap the benefits in the end, right? So again, how you can prevent your work from being outdated before you do it is, like I said, literature review, right? Your studies are going to maximum, at our level, are going to maximum go on for 3, 4, 5 months. And if someone's publishing it, a similar study in that time, then it's still relatively new and it's not really outdated just because someone's published it, right? But if there are like 50 papers already in the past 10 years, then you know that the article you are trying to submit is, oversubscribed. So then after you've determined that your results are original, your significant enhancement of published work, and it's an up-to-date review, right? So even when you get your results, you can again stop yourself and ask yourself if I'm meeting these criteria before you start writing your article, right? So that again saves you time, it saves you the hassle, and it just helps you move on to other projects that you may want to do. Okay. So at multiple points in the research cycle, you have to ask yourself, okay, is this what I'm doing right, or this what I'm doing wrong? Because you are going to be investing 3-4 months of your professional life into this, and it may seem like a little, but instead you could be working on another project that would probably give you more exposure to the outside world. Other people would be more likely to read it. So just ask yourself these questions in the middle, and if there are any ways you can make modifications to your study at that point, make them, right? So as with all steps taken so far, it is imperative to plan your steps before you start writing your article, right? Determine the type of article that you're writing, either the full article or something we call an original article or something we call a research article, or it's the letter short communication again, which usually you have to be an expert to get the invitation for, or a review paper, right? Uh, so again, letters and short communication are also don't always need to be by experts in their field. So some journals will accept letters or short communications by people if their results are so thrilling that they need to share them ASAP. So one place where this has become really common these days is because of COVID, and you'll see a lot of letter to or short communications to the journal editor being sent and being published in JAMA and NEJM, simply because they haven't had the time to sit and make a proper article, but because they have found, okay, say remdesivir or a particular drug or a particular way of a particular position or prone or something that they've used in ventilation is really proving to increase or rather decrease the mortality of patients with COVID, then they submit these short communications so that people around the world know that this is what's being done in this particular place, and you may follow it if you feel like what they're saying makes sense, right? Again, it comes in the level 5 of evidence, right, along with case reports, but it's just something that allows quick dissemination of information where it doesn't have to go through the whole peer review process. It doesn't take 6 weeks, 7 weeks, and articles are published ASAP if there is something that really needs to be shared. So before you start writing, you have to choose your target journal before you start writing. Again, I spoke of tools like PubMed, where there's a journals tab available that shows you the different types of, like, say, hepatology or renal system or orthopedics or spine or whatever it is. That shows you a list of journals that are indexed in PubMed. There's something also called SCI, MAJOR, SCI, MAJOR. It's a website where it gives you the ranking of the journals, right? And you can see what suits you, okay? And you can go on the journal's website, see where it's indexed, and if it's PubMed indexed, definitely go for it. But like sir said, don't aim for tier 1 journals as medical students. Aim for tier 2 journals. So SCI MAJOR or SCI MAJR, I'm sure if you Google it, it'll turn up, and you can see the ranking of different journals in different subspecialties or different fields, and you can then accordingly choose what journal you want to submit in, because I understand some people have a hard time finding the list of journals and then don't know if it's a difficult journal to get into or not. So this gives you a ranking of the different journals that are available, right? I'll share the link in the group once we're done with today's presentation. So how you're going to choose your target journal is the aim to reach the intended audience is that whether the journal subscribers are similar to the audience that you're intending to reach. So like I said, hepatology journal will not want basic molecular studies. If it's talking about clinical hepatology, they won't want basic molecular studies of how hepatitis C virus is duplicating, how the genes involved and stuff like that. So they may not choose to publish it because they are focused on clinical research, and they're focused on surgeons who are basically going to use their journal for getting information. You can always ask your supervisors or colleagues what sort of journals they have published their articles in, and then choose choose the journals accordingly. And then you should make a short list, right, of plan A, plan B, like we did with our medical school, right? We had our top preference, we had other preferences below it. So just make maybe 3 or 4 journals that you are handy with, saying, okay, these are the journals that you want to submit to, and I can possibly get my article in there. And then you submit to the topmost journal in your list, right? Then you see your references. So I don't think we've spoken too much about it, but references is basically when you cite a particular article, or you cite or just quote the findings in that particular article. So that article comes under your references. So if that article is similar to what you want to publish, which it usually will be with references, you can just see what journal they have published in, and you can then find out with this Psi major whether or not that journal accepts sorry, whether or not that journal is like a tier 1 journal or a tier 2 journal, and then you'll be able to figure out whether you want to submit it there or not. So this is just a way of finding, you know, different sorts of journals from different sorts of places. So then you can start preparing your article. Always refer to the guide for authors of your target journal, right? So once you've established that, okay, this journal number 1 is something that I really want to go through. Sorry, this is, that I really want to publish in, and I have the capability, my research has the capability to publish it in that particular journal. Then you move on to repeat about how to judge midway of the research if it's worth. Oh yeah, Sai Mago JR. Yeah, exactly. I usually Google it, so that's what it is. But yeah, so always refer to the guide for authors, right? So once you've selected the top journal that you know or want to publish in, you go to their website. There's always going to be something for guide for authors. If you want, I'll show you guys a sample journal website and how to get information from there at the end of this particular presentation. And yeah, so that guide for authors will have word by word by word guide on how your article has to be framed, how your references need to be framed, everything like that, right? Again, this is always found on the journal website, and if your journal website does not have it, 99.9 out of 100 times it's going to be a fake journal, that, you know, the predatory journals that we spoke about. Okay, this person's been asking about Vancouver style of writing and references for a long time now, but we're gonna figure it out. I'm gonna show you all a basic of EndNote and the different styles of referencing that are there. But there's nothing really cool about Vancouver style or Harvard style or just any style, NLM style. It doesn't matter, because if your referencing tool is good, there are Mendeley, there is EndNote. You can use those, and you can automatically adjust the type of style that you want. So different journals would require different styles, and you can just adjust it through that. You don't really need to know exactly what's, you know, used in it, because you're not going to be the one formatting your references. You're going to have a citation manager to do that. So we'll talk about that in a bit. Right now, let's focus on writing your article before we move on to, you know, all these cosmetic things that you need to do to your article to get it submitted in a journal. So again, a short recap on preparing for article writing. Determine if you are ready to publish your work. Decide on the best type of manuscript and choose the target journal. And after that, check the guide for authors, right? So this is a general structure of an article, okay? Title, which we already said, is basically what you choose to, you know, name your article. And we talk about how there are certain criteria that you have to meet in title. It's preferred that you meet, you don't have to meet them, but it's just an easy tool to use. Then there's the abstract. Abstract, like I said, it's a short 150 to 250 to maybe sometimes maximum of 300 words that you have to use to basically give a short description of your whole article, including your intro, your results, your discussion, your conclusion, everything. Then we move on to keywords. So usually what I personally do is, again, like we had spoken about, mesh, the medical subject headings. So what I usually do is I go to medical subject headings ka website, and I see, and I type in my keywords that I feel are appropriate for my article, and I see if it's a mesh word or not. And then and if it's not, I, you know, do those changes. Like I said, if stress is not a mesh word, I use anxiety and stuff like that. And then I add those keywords to my article. Then introduction is basically, you know, what's the background of this particular topic that you're researching? Why are you researching this? What made you research this? Methods is basically each and everything that you did, including all equipments, number of participants that you approached, how many had you approached, how many actually came with an answer or answer to your questionnaire. Then the results and discussion, which is basically so results and discussion are two separate things. Results is basically when you're just talking about cold hard facts, then there can't be any interpretations in the results. And discussion is when you're discussing it in the context of previous research that's been done. Okay. Then you have the conclusions, which is basically what your study is concluding from this, like what steps need to be taken further, whether further research needs to be done, or whether you need to, suppose you're talking about developmental dysphagia of hip. Okay, it's a condition in infants, right? And it's usually missed. So I had done a study along with 4 of our PubGeek actually research volunteers that we studied why infants are being missed with this particular disease. And our conclusion was that there needs to be a better training system for referral and for pediatrics and general physicians to actually try to figure out whether this kid has the disease or not. So they use particular tests that we said that they should be trained in better, so that they, while screening their infants, so that they detect it earlier than they actually do right now. We spoke about references, and supporting materials are basically your tables, your figures. If you have any videos, say if you're talking about a surgical technique or something, then we have the supporting materials along with that, right? So how the process of writing works, a lot of you would probably think it's like writing a book, start from chapter 1, go to chapter 2, go to chapter 3, etc. But it's actually not. It's actually like filming a movie where they do one part together, which is completely broken off, then they do the second and stuff. But so this is actually how you should move towards writing your article, right? You go from figures and tables. You get your cold hard facts ready with you. You make your tables, you make your figures. Then you move on to writing the methods of how you actually got these things done. Okay. Then you write your results. Okay. Then you write your discussion. So once you have established your cold hard data, then you go to the methods that you follow to get this data. Then you talk about the exact data that you actually got. Then you follow how this data is important in the current scientific environment, how people are going to benefit from it, what has previously been said about this particular um, topic and stuff like that. Then you move on to the conclusion and introduction, right? Then the conclusion will flow very easily, because now you know what has been previously said, what you are saying, and what needs to be done in the future, right? So once you have that clear after writing your methods, result, and discussion, you'll be easily able to write the conclusion. Then your introduction just needs to be why you did this and what is the basic background of this whole thing, right? And then after you yourself have understood your article completely and thoroughly, then you write your title, then you write your short abstract, and then you write your keywords, right? It's not title, abstract, keywords, then intro, then methods, results, discussion, conclusion, and figures and tables. So it's completely different from how a person is actually going to read the article, right? But it's something that will help you. You don't need to write it like this, but it's something that helps me, and I'm sure will help you when you are writing your articles. So in methods, exactly what you have to write is describe how the problem was studied, what methods you used, how did you arrive at your target population. Again, the inclusion and exclusion criteria that we had already discussed. If you used any specific equipment, for example, a vernier caliper to measure, say, the thickness of their skin fold, or some specific drug that you use, or a specific weighing scale or something, a particular type of weighing scale that you used to weigh your participants in that study. The purpose of this section is basically to ensure that you have written any and all information that would be required by someone to recreate that study. Okay, so I say, okay, this person has done this study, and I don't think that his results are right? So the whole purpose of this method is to show them that, okay, this is the exact methodology that I followed. And if you have any flaws if you feel like you find any flaws within this methodology, please do let me know. So that person, instead of just, straight up questioning your results, he may question your methodology, right? Because your methodology is false, then he will question your results. Okay. But this basically, and it also allows him to do his own research. And it's basically an information powerhouse for people who want to do their own research but don't know how to go about it. Because if you see a study and you see, okay, wow, I really want to replicate this study, or I want to do something along these lines, you can see the method section of various articles that are similar to the study you're trying to do, and determine how they solved the particular roadblocks that you face while doing this research. Okay. um so yeah, you have to identify all equipment and materials, and here is where you state the statistical tests that you used and the ethics committee approval that you have got. Okay. So you always, that you have to mention the types of statistics that you use, say student t-tests, Wilcoxon rank test, or there are multiple Mann-Whitney U tests, lots of tests that you can use, and this is where you get help from your statistician. And you should also mention that you have received ethics committee approval. And a lot of you have asked me, if I'm just doing a survey, do I need ethics committee approval? What usually happens in that particular case is that you have a research protocol ready, you submit it to your ethics committee, and they say, okay, hey, like whenever they have their meeting or whatever, they'll say, we'll give you a letter saying you don't need ethics committee approval for this particular topic, but you need that letter, right? And you write that ethics committee approval not required, ethics committee approval sanctioned, and this thing deemed that approval not required, or something, some one line saying that you have approached ethics committee and they have evaluated your research protocol. Okay, this will be required for every journal, and if you lie about it, trust me, no one can help you. Okay, because whatever you printed, it's done, right? You can't ever change it, because once it's on the internet, it's on the internet, right? And yeah, so that's the method section, and this is sometimes stuff that I use. I don't know how well you can see this, so I'm just going to decrease the size. Oops. Yeah. So this was actually this is still actually a part of the study that I am involved in, and I will be publishing this year. You see how I've divided my whole articles, like my whole methodology section, into different parts, so that I myself am oriented as to what parts I'm missing out on, and what parts basically I need to add on, and it allows me to and it allows the reader also to know exactly what's going on in every paragraph. Because if you can imagine, if I hadn't divided it into these multiple parts, then someone would be so annoyed just reading this whole page, which may have, just irritated them and just said, nahi, nahi, your article is rejected, right? So just like you're trying to help your teachers read your long LAQs or your SAQs, try to help your reviewers read your article, so that it's easier for them to understand, it's easier for them to read. Okay. Okay. So then we move on to do nots of the method section. Um, the first point is actually applicable for any part of the article that you are writing, because you don't want irrelevant detail to increase the length of your article, and then it'll annoy the reviewer further into reading your article, and it'll annoy him to just go through it again and again and not understand what you're trying to say. So don't write irrelevant detail. um, don't provide any background information that doesn't directly help the reader to understand why a particular method was used, or how the data was gathered, or how it was organized. Okay. There's no unnecessary explanation of basic procedures needed. Remember that you're not writing a how-to guide about a particular method. You make assumption that the readers possess basic understanding of the medical science, or the questions that you are talking about, and therefore you don't have to go into great depths about the specific methodological procedures. For example, if I'm talking about salt and hypertension again, I'm not going to write BP was measured in a left lateral position with a size 4 cuff attached to the arm with and with the BP instrument kept at the level of the heart and stuff. It's not important. You have to understand they have basic knowledge of you know basic sciences or basic medical knowledge. So you don't have to go into irrelevant detail about how you measured their BP, or how you really how I felt pulse with 3 fingers on the left hand of the radial artery. Like, it's really not needed. um and just don't waste your time and your viewers time with this sort of excess detail. Okay. Again, problem blindness. It's almost a given that you will encounter problems when collecting or generating your data. Do not ignore these problems or pretend that they did not occur. Often documenting how you overcame obstacles can form an interesting part of the methodology. It demonstrates to the reader that you can provide a rationale for the decisions you made to minimize the impact of any problems. Like, suppose you have 5 patients that followed up with you for 1 week and then they disappeared. Don't just directly exclude them from the data and say, okay, I have 147 patients instead of the 150 that I actually had. Say that 150 were actually recruited and 3 were lost to follow up, or for whatever reason they didn't want to be part of the study, and that's why now you have 147 patients. So people know exactly, like, it's basically a insight into exactly what you did, right? So there is no question of, you trying to hide something, or you're trying to, fudge your details or fudge your data. Basically, is being completely open about it. Okay. So again, literature review, just a literature review section of your paper provides an overview of the sources you have examined while researching a particular topic. The methodology section should cite any sources that informed your choice and application of a particular method. Okay. For example, if you are saying that measurement of, suppose, okay, this is completely theoretical, measurement of BP with a neck cuff that I have tried. Okay. And obviously you can never do that because the person will suffer from, he'll essentially die. Okay. He'll suffer from some sort of TIA. And anyways, suppose you're using this. Okay. And then another paper has suppose done this. They have done this. And then you say, okay, this is the method that I used, which has already been done in this paper. Okay. So you're not again mentioning the details of the way that you did it. Okay. Yeah, so suppose I'm talking about the definition of developmental dysplasia of hip, which is basically like consider it as a hip pathology. Okay. If I'm talking about the definition, I can see, I am no one to define hip dysplasia, right? But if a definition of hip dysplasia has been, published previously, so published is taken as like it's the word of the scientific community, right? If it's been published. Okay. So once it's been published, you can refer or reference that article within your method section. You're allowed to do that, okay? And say that we defined DDH as so and so, reference, whatever, article, Anirudh et al. Or whatever it is, okay? And if there's some surgical procedure that has been used or has been described previously, and you are trying to, see whether the surgical procedure works, and you're, working with your faculty or something, you can just directly reference that surgical technique has been outlined previously, and you can, reference that previous article that has already been come. So you're not explaining your surgical technique again. Okay. So if the reviewer is really interested, he will go to that article if he's not familiar with it, and then he'll read that whole thing. So your article, see, there is also a 2000, 3000 limit word, right? And it seems like a lot, but it's actually not too much. Okay, so make sure you don't go overboard, and you want your article to be concise, right? No one's going to complain that, oh, why did you not include surgical technique? And if they do, if the reviewer does complain about that, then you can simply add it. Okay. But usually that won't be the case if you have referenced it properly in a published article previously. Okay. Yeah, so I think we're good with the method section. I think this was a little blurred to you guys, so I'm just gonna show it properly if I can. I'm just gonna show a right example of what Dr. Alaric and I were working on. Unfortunately, he was going to be part of this conference, but he was not able to be here because he was busy with some other projects. So I'm sure y'all can see now that I have said that the study site is so and so, the protocol that was used. So as like I said, I can reference previous protocols that we use the Ponseti protocol that has already been defined previously. So we just said we have been using this Ponseti protocol that has been, defined previously and has been referenced previously. So we're not gonna, go through this again. So again, this is confidential material. I'm just sharing with you guys because we're in this session and it might help you. So please don't screenshot it or share it anywhere. It might hurt me in the end. Right. So let's move on to any questions about the. Don't worry about if it's blur or not, because it doesn't. You're not going to copy this, right? I'm just showing you that we have divided the method section into different sections itself, and then said something specific about the study site, or said something specific about the protocol that we used, how we had the follow-up and stuff like that, right? So yeah, again, there is, so I'll at the end of this talk, we'll go through together some research papers that I have published, which I have the authority of sharing with you, right? And we'll see how I went about them and how, those stuff. So don't worry about that just yet. So in the results section, it's very important to have just the data of primary importance. Okay. Use only data that you consider central to your study. There is no need to mention the demographic details, as this can be mentioned in a separate table. Okay, usually what people do is age, sex, you know, socioeconomic status and stuff like that. They just keep in one separate table so that you're not cluttering your result section with this. Because usually, um, you can just write the average age, and so many were male, and then you can actually give information about male, female, people below 30, 40, or according to the study type that you are using. You can define that in a table instead of cluttering your results section. um, you should keep the results of the same type together. Like, consider you're studying the use of a particular plate, like a particular instrument in orthopedics, okay? And you have different, you're studying the difference between, say, effectiveness of this plate and, treating a fracture in young patients and old patients. So it would be smart to keep the results of the young patients in one paragraph and then the old patients in another paragraph. So that it's not like you're talking about, okay, there were so many young patients and the follow-up time for young patients was 2 years, the follow-up time for old people was 4 years, then the mean improvement in their score was 7 for young people, 8 for old people. So don't do that. If you have young people as one paragraph, then it'll be much easier to read, it'll be much easier to apply for the reviewers are also understanding exactly what's going on. And also the important thing is, if you have two separate paragraphs and the first paragraph of, they say, the young people is talking about their average age and the severity of the fracture and stuff, make sure the first paragraph of the old people is also talking about that. So the reviewer can go to this and then go to the second paragraph and just compare it like that. So that becomes much easier for a reviewer to go through. Yeah, so definitely keep the results of the same type together. Use subheadings just like we did in the materials and methods section. We will keep subheadings so that we know exactly what's going on. I'll show you an example on the next slide. Make it easy to read. Do not present too many numbers. I know it's supposed to be about analytics, but instead of saying, I'll show you an example of how it can be a little too numbery. Okay. And you want to feature your unexpected findings, right? Because when a person is going through results, he's already a little bored with the numbers, right? Not bored, but maybe confused with the numbers and exactly what's going on there. So you want to feature your unexpected findings, right? I'm not saying write it in bold or italics or something, but you want to mention them maybe in a separate paragraph or at the start or at the end of your results or something like that, right? And when you're presenting your data, right, you should always, suppose you're presenting BP, okay, BP in few patients, okay, present it with a mean and a standard deviation, okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about statistics, but we have to include those and always include a p-value, okay. Again, p-value is something that we're going to discuss. So this is an example of the same article, I think. No, it's a different article that again I'm working on with Dr. Alaric. I don't know if you can read this or not. But it's basically an example of how numbery that this results section is. And I approached Dr. Alric with this particular writing in the literature, and he just told me, Anirudh, what's wrong with you? Why are you sending me all these numbers for? Just make tables for it. And it's just an example of, I mean, I've just tried to read through it, these two paragraphs, and you'll find that your brain is just, not understanding exactly what's going on. But like, as you can see on the top, there is a table 2 now, and we have actually decreased. This is just an example of before I made edits to this. But yeah, so there were different cohorts in this. As you can see, cerebral palsy cohort, there was a DDH cohort, there was a Perthes cohort and stuff. So I've divided, so there were like a total of 40 patients, suppose. So I've divided them as 12 Perthes, 6 cerebral palsy, and say 6 with DDH and stuff like that, right? So that when a person is reading about reading the results section, he knows that CP patients had this result, and then he can immediately go at the same part of that paragraph to the DDH, the CP or the DDH patients, and see exactly what was going on there, right? So this is just a small example of how you can make your results section to numbery. And don't get me wrong, everything that's in this article, I mean, in this particular 2-3 paragraphs is important part of the study. However, it's not presented in the right way, right? The presentation should have been in a table format. right? It's not that I've included information that's not important. It is important, but my presentation skills have failed me here. Okay. So again, some tips for the results section. For example, if you've noticed an unusual correlations between two variables during analysis of finding, like salt hypertension, if you see that, decrease in salt intake is increasing hypertension, it is correct to point this out in the results section. However, speculating as to why this correlation exists and offering a hypothesis about what may be happening belongs to a discussion section. So you just have to say, suppose 30% of the patients that took salt, their BP decreased. Okay, you don't have to say this may be because of decreased water intake, because of whatever reason it is that you are thinking it is. That belongs in a discussion section, and that's why you're discussing your result. Okay, that's why it's called the discussion section, right? So present results with a short explanation of the findings, but don't go on to write about hypotheses that you're possibly using to say why I found this particular result. Okay. And then present a section and then discuss it before presenting the next section, then discuss it and so on. So what you basically need to do is, like I said, divide your result sections into particular subsections so that's easier to follow. Essentially, this is what this slide means. Okay. So again, some tips on graphs and tables. Never repeat the data in text with graphs and tables. Okay. So suppose you've written about their age and specifics about their age or their socioeconomic status and stuff. And again, you're repeating in a table. No, that's wrong. However, what you can do is you can say 34 males were included in this study. Average mean age was say 35, and 70% belonged to the upper socioeconomic class. Okay. And then when you're in your table, you can say, okay, males 50, female 30, age, average this, standard deviation was this, and then you can say, okay, upper class was so many, upper middle, lower, essentially. Then you can, go beyond what you have written in the results section. But it'll be much easier for a person to read your results section if there are not too many numbers in it, right? Yeah. So when to use tables and when to use graphs? Okay, this is usually a question that arises in some people's minds. So when should you use graphs? So when you need to skip. So when to use tables, when to use graphs? Okay. Basically, you should use tables when you are talking about specific, let's say categorical variables, but you guys don't. So we're going to talk about this in the statistics section, okay? But when to skip tables and graphs is when there is no complicated data, okay? And the good guideline to follow is that the tables you are creating is less than 2 by 2, which means that less 2 columns, 2 rows is less than that, then you don't create a table. And if the data that you are planning to present in this table or graph is secondary to the main data set, okay? Which means that it's actually not that super important to the findings of your actual study, and you're just presenting it ki matlab maine ye sab bhi collect kiya tha, but no one really cares about that, and neither should you. Okay, so don't present tables and graphs just to look cool on a research paper. It really doesn't help you at all. In fact, the reviewers have to go through these extra tables, and if they don't find anything interesting or something new that you've spoken, it'll be an annoyance to them and may hurt your chances. So these are a few examples of when it's not good to use tables. Okay, like if I'm just making a table one for the sake of it, like males 42, females 21. This I can just easily write in a text, right? Unless I'm including, say, their socioeconomic status, their average age, hypertension, BP level, and stuff like that in one table, then it becomes more complex. But since it's a 2 by 2 table, it really makes no sense. Okay. If I'm doing a genetics study and I'm saying most common animal with the gene is rats, least frequent animal with the gene is guinea pig, again, it doesn't deserve a table, right? If you presented this in a written format, it would not make that much of an annoyance to the reader, right? And therefore, that's when you don't use these tables. Okay. Again, like we discussed do nots of the methods section, let's discuss do nots of the results section. You don't need to discuss or interpret your results. Like I said, if you have found that salt causes a decreased BP, like high salt consumption causes decreased BP, you don't discuss this in your result section. That's for your discussion section. Okay. You just write what you have found there. Research section is basically for cold, hard facts that you have been able to find from your own study, not relying on anyone else. Okay, this I'm talking about an original article. Review article is a completely different ballgame. Okay. Then reporting background information or attempting to explain your findings. Again, same like I said, don't refer to, you can't, there is no reference allowed in results section. Okay, like methods, but method section references allowed, introduction section references allowed, discussion section references allowed, but results section, you cannot reference any other article. Okay, because the results section is only about what you have found, and that's about it. Okay. You don't ignore your negative results, right? Just because say you found that no association was found between salt consumption and hypertension, right? Don't just say that. Don't try to avoid writing that in your results section and say, hey, I'll just talk about like the important stuff that I have found. I'm just gonna avoid this for now. Don't do that, because when another student or another researcher is doing his background research and he reads your article and he sees that, okay, this guy's already done this particular analysis and he found that there is no a correlation between these things. So I should not waste my time, maybe going through these, going through the steps of research and wasting my time and, writing about, conducting the whole study and just to realize that there is no difference and there is evidence for it before, right? So make sure you're not ignoring your negative results. Document them, then state in your discussion why you believe a negative result emerged in your study. Okay. Note that the negative results and how you handle them often provides you with the opportunity to write a more engaging discussion. And therefore, don't be afraid to highlight them. Like, see, research paper is not supposed to be an avenue for you to put your best foot forward. That's not what it is. It's about to truthfully say what you did and how you did it and what you found. Okay, that's essentially it about like what a research paper is about. Okay. Don't include raw data. Again, this holds for quantitative studies and not qualitative studies. Like say, this so and so patient. Like just have tables of people just patient one had this BP, patient two had this. Like don't include that because no one's interested in that. That's why we have the science of statistics that helps you compress your articles. I compress the data that you found into actual results that can give you meaning. Okay. Don't use phrases that are vague, like saying the BP appeared to be greater than the BP in group one. The BP appeared to be greater than the BP in two. No, either it was greater or it wasn't greater, right? Because this is about results. This is about data. This is about cold hard facts. Again, I repeat, right? So don't use like appears to be greater or demonstrates promising trends. No, you can leave all that for your discussion section. Results section is about what you exactly found. If you didn't find a trend that is statistically significant, don't write although it was not statistically significant, it was promising. No, that you can discuss that in the discussion section, but not in your results section. It's all about what you found and the numbers behind what you found. Okay. Don't repeat the same data more than once, even if you found that your drug decreases mortality in cancer patients by 80%. You start your results with our drug decreases this, and then again in the end, and therefore our drug decreases mortality by 80%. Just because it's a cool or it's an amazing finding that you've got doesn't mean that you repeat it. This is not, this is not Instagram or Facebook or something where you're trying to grab people's attention. You're trying to report what about your work and how they should, benefit from it. It's not a social media post, right? So now let's move on to the discussion section. It's actually one of the most important sections. You get a chance to interpret your results. You get to compare already published results with your own, because it effectively demonstrates your ability as a researcher to think critically about an issue, okay, to develop creative solutions to the problems based on the findings, and to formulate a deeper, more profound understanding of the research problem you're studying, right? The discussion section is actually where you explore the underlying meaning of your research, its possible implications in other areas of study, and the possible improvements that can be made in order to further develop concerns of your research, right? This is a section where you need to present the importance of your study and how it can contribute or fill in the existing gaps that are present in the field. Okay. If appropriate, the discussion section is also where you state how the findings from your study revealed new gaps in literature that had not been previously exposed or described adequately. right? So when you're talking about the discussion section, you are essentially seeing what sort of results that you got, why you got them, why they are different from the results that were previously shown, how this changes the field's view towards a particular topic or a particular science, right? So this basically allows you to do that. There are a few general rules that you have to follow in the discussion section. You can be concise and make your points clearly. Do not be competitive that, hey, hamari result mein ye mila, and there's this other study. Like if I'm at Nair, if I'm at AIMS Delhi, and if I'm at, say, Maulana Azad or something, say, oh, AIMS Delhi found this, Maulana Azad found this. Are, don't be competitive like that. Just show that previous studies showed this is this, our study shows this is this. Why we feel there is a why we feel our study should be relied more upon is this reason, right? Don't be competitive that we have 40,000 patients, but other studies have only 10,000 patients. No, like just be calm and just write your research. It's not for social media play. Just write your research, be honest about it, and just discuss your research in the context of literature previously. Don't say that, hey, like we are the biggest institute. No one cares. Okay. Avoid using jargon. Some people think that research writing has to have specific words or a specific way of writing sentences, but that's not true. I've taken multiple courses on how to do research writing, and it's basically what everyone has said is be as simple as possible. Okay, because the reviewer that you are, that you're submitting your article to, he will also appreciate that you are explaining your study in a very simplistic manner. Okay. um, some people, like, there's a saying that you can only be an expert at something if you can explain it to your grandma properly, right? And if your grandmother can understand the discussion section properly, then you know that you've done your job, you avoided any jargon, and you really are an expert in your field because you've explained it simply and not try to use too complex words and try to impress other people when it's not needed, right? Another technical importance of discussion is that you use the present verb tense, like saying this is what we found, or this was what we found, right? So present tense means the present tense verb, especially for established fact, like say it is true that increased salt consumption causes increase in BP. Not it was true or it has been. Just use the present tense, right? However, refer to specific verbs, works and references in the past tense, which means that suppose I'm writing a study and I say John et al. Found that this happened, so that I'm using the past tense, right? But if I'm writing about my own results, I'm using the present tense. Okay, I hope you guys understand it. It's not too complex. But if you have any questions, like, do let me know. Again, like here also in discussion, also you can definitely use subheadings to help organize your presentations or to group your interpretations into themes and stuff. So it becomes easier for you and the reader to know exactly what you spoke about, like what you missed, how you can add on to other information and stuff like that, right? The content of the discussion is basically explanation of the results, comment on whether or not the results were expected, and present explanation for the results, right? Go into greater depth when explaining findings that were unexpected, or especially if they have a great significance to the scientific community. If appropriate, note any unusual or unanticipated patterns or trends that emerge from your results and explain their meaning. Like if you found something that's usually not supposed to be there, why is that particular thing there? So like explain. You can't just say, "Acha, mujhe to ye mila, wow, khatam." Like, wow, what a research, right? You have to explain why you found what you did, why your certain results were a little more complex or were a little different from what previously has been found. It's basically a chance for you to explain that I know a lot about this particular topic, and that's why I have done this research, and this is how my research differentiates is different from the other research papers, right? You can refer to previous research, compare your results with other findings, or use other studies to support your claim. So it's not that if you have found that increase, suppose it's a very old study, but again I'm using the same example, that increased salt causes increased high BP, then increased BP, then you can say, okay, so and so also found that this happened, right? It's not that if you reference or if you cite those articles that you're saying, "Acha, mera to a new study hai hi nahi, it's a very old study," and don't worry about all those things. If there are certain studies that have found results similar or along the lines of what you have found, and you can definitely reference them. Don't be scared to reference them that, oh, they'll find out that this article exists. People know that this article exists if they're experts in the field, right? They know exactly, if they're reviewers in journals, they're usually updated with the latest in literature. And if your discussion section is actually very profound and it's included the latest knowledge and the latest um, papers that have been published in that field, the reviewers will also understand that, okay, this person has done their research and like their background research well, and they understand why their paper is new, and they'll give you a shorter publication, right? Again, it's a deduction or claim for how the results can be applied more generally. For example, describing your lessons learned, proposing new recommendations, and there should be more training for dyes because of the high mortality rate, or whatever it is. Okay, and recommending the best practices. If you found this surgery can possibly decrease the mortality rate, say that more training for the surgery can be done, or increased evaluation of the surgery is needed, and stuff like that. Okay. So the organization and structure should be from general to specific. Link your findings to literature, then theory, and then practice, right? First, you talk about what has been found in literature previously. Then you theorize yourself that, okay, this can be possibly done to decrease this mortality rate in women in villages. And then you say, okay, how it can be decreased is, practical solutions that you can possibly give them. Okay. So again, begin by briefly restating the research problem you were investigating, and answer all of the research questions underpinning the problem that you pose in the introduction. So we will discuss now that in the introduction, you have to say exactly what aims and objectives that you started out your research with. And discussion also give you a chance to say how you met those aims and objectives. All right. Then you describe the patterns and relationships shown by each major finding. Include again, I'm repeating, include the analysis of any unexpected findings and stuff like that. Okay. Again, do not waste entire sentences restating your results. You're saying that, oh, this drug caused 80% less mortality. Say, oh wow, our drug, which is a new drug, we are very happy to announce that. No, it's not a marketing play. It's you're comparing your results to something that was done before and stuff like that. Do not introduce new results in a discussion. Whatever results that you have received from your study needs to be included in the results section. Okay. If they haven't been included in the results section, do not include them in the discussion. Now, an example of this is, suppose I'm saying, in the results I've said that 50% mortality decreased just by my intervention of placing dyes every 1 meter in the village. Suppose, consider, and in the discussion I am saying that placing them every 2 meters increased the mortality by 50%, and I've not mentioned this. Increase the mortality by 30%. Okay, and I've not mentioned this anywhere in the discussion section. In the results section. Then that discussion section is not right, because if I have any sort of results, any sort of information that I've received from my article, from my study, then I have to include them in the results section. Okay. Yeah, so you can have recommendations for further research saying that more attention should be paid on the causes for, say, maternal mortality in villages and stuff like that. So you can either include that in your discussion or your conclusion. Don't repeat it again in the conclusion, because that repetitive behavior is really not good in a scientific article. Again, use the first person. Again, it's a technical thing that you can use we authors, or you can use I if you're the only author and stuff like that. You should use it, but it may distract the person involved. But usually something I use is that the authors instead of we authors and stuff like that. Okay. So the conclusion section, it gives you the ability to present the last word in your research on the issues basically that you raised, the objectives that you were trying to start with, and the objectives that you have or have not met through your research. You can summarize your thoughts and convey larger implications of your study. The basic point or the opportunity that the conclusion section gives you is to answer the question, so what? Like, so what if I did this research? How is it changing things in the particular research area? How is it changing things in the, in the field of research or in that particular subject area that you're studying? Okay. You have to demonstrate the importance of your ideas. Don't be shy. Don't be, thinking that, oh, मैं तो सिर्फ medical student हूँ, मेरा इतना क्या research होता है. If your research is actually stating something that's unknown before, or it provides significant changes to something that's known before, don't be shy to include it in your conclusion. You can possibly include some new or expanded ways of thinking about the research problem, but how differently someone can possibly approach it in the future, and how it may show different results or may give results that are more important. And just basically, it helps you answer the question, so what, right? In the conclusion section, the rules to follow is use simple language. It's usually, conclusion section is not more than, I would say, 100 words or 50 to 100 words in most articles. Do not simply reiterate results. So in conclusion, we found that this has happened. No, just try to answer the question, so what, and then your conclusion section will be successful. Okay. Then again, indicate opportunities for any for future research that may be possible either through you or through someone else who may be reading your paper and is interested in that particular field, right? These are a few examples of how you can make your conclusion even stronger. You can recommend specific courses of action, either taken by the government if you find out that, hey, the screening of this particular DDH is low in village areas, and this is what their training should be increased. And the government should establish a program to increase, or whatever it is, whatever thoughts that you have that could decrease the problem that you have detected in your study. Or yeah, so basically it's basically for that. Okay, you can restate your key statistics or facts, but again, make sure that you're not reiterating just that in the conclusion. You can say that because we found that such a high proportion of people are suffering from hypertension due to salt, this thing, we recommend that. So don't just make it one sentence that we found this and that's your conclusion. No, don't do that. You can provide a take-home message to help the reader remember your study, saying, if you found that a particular approach of a surgery will help with your mortality results, then you say the take-home message is that approaching, say, the liver from the lateral side instead of anterior decreases the chance of, say an IVC, say nicking the IVC by 50% of whatever it is. So some take-home message where in one sentence you are briefly giving the reader the main point of your article, right? So like I said, we have to move on from, we have to move downwards up. So we have written the methods, we have written the results, the discussion, and then the conclusion, and then we move on to the introduction. It provides a brief context to the readers. It addresses the problem, identifies available solutions and limitations of those solutions. So what led you to this research, right? The context of it, say if I'm studying about DDH and I write that DDH is so prevalent in this place, so many cases of DDH are missed. In Australia, they've done a study, they've said so much DDH missed there. In developed countries, so much missed. Developing countries, so much missed. And that's the problem that is there. The available solutions for this have been showcased by other countries, including, say, a resilient screening program, etc. And how I am trying to see is, suppose I'm talking about where the patient is going first and seeing if whether that person has diagnosed the patient correctly and stuff. Basically, it's essentially that's what an example of a study introduction section I'm giving you. Okay, and in the end, in 2 or 3 lines, just identify your aims and objectives. Just a small 2-3 line aims and objectives. So therefore, we are trying to determine why DDH cases are being missed in India, or something like that, something along those lines. Okay. What you can ask yourself basically to write the introduction section is, what was I studying? Why was this topic so important to investigate? What did we know about this topic before I studied? What were the other studies that were done before I chose to publish this? How will this study either change our knowledge, or how do I hope that this study will change our knowledge or advance our knowledge? And what are the new things that I'm trying to research from this, basically? Okay. So basically, establish an area to research by. highlighting the importance of the topic, making general statements about the topic, presenting an overview on the current research that's available on the topic, identifying a research niche by opposing an existing assumption, like saying, um, um, except by saying that suppose this study found that approaching from the lateral side was this thing, was not right. Some studies have found that, but we thought, since their sample size was lower, and since most of the evidence is based on case reports, we thought a complete analysis or a complete evaluation should be done through a large patient section and stuff like that. So you can easily write your introduction section is actually one of the easiest sections to write, because it essentially is basically about why you're doing this study, and that's, I think, one of the easiest questions to answer if you really have an interest in your study and not doing it just for the sake of it. Okay. How to keep a reader engaged is open with a compelling story, include a strong quotation. Okay, this is usually sometimes done with letters to editors. It's usually not done with original articles. Okay, this is basically for basically not for us. Okay, avoid dictionary introduction, like saying, so you won't believe some people actually do this by saying orthopedics is defined as say a study of the skeletal system and its pathologies, and just don't give dictionary definitions of anything in a proper research article. Okay, this is not an essay that you're writing for your 10th standard or 12th standard. Okay. Always end with a roadmap of how you basically, this is the problem that you were facing, and this is the objectives and aims that you set out with because other studies found this. Okay, now let's move on to titles. Okay, they need to attract attention. They should be the fewest possible words. Don't think that just because it's a large title with a lot of complex words that people are going to get attracted to. No, if your title is only difficult to read, then no reviewer is going to be super interested in reading your whole article. Okay, it makes sure that it is adequately describing the content and it's identifying the main issue. Don't use technical jargon. Okay, there are actually multiple papers that are published on just what makes an effective title, like what title characteristics increase the amount of citations or increase the amount of readers for a particular article. This is a example of some. Like in 2011, these guys identified 6 lakh articles through Web of Science journals, and they saw that hyphens and colons are common in some disciplines, and not including them correlates negatively with impact, which means that if you have hyphens and colons in your article, its impact will be more. Okay. Then these guys said, Habib Zadeh and Yarali, and I'm sorry if I can't pronounce that right. They evaluated 9,000 articles, and they said articles with longer titles are cited more. So again, these are just some of the studies that are being done on these articles. There are multiple more, but my sincere advice would be make it as simple as possible. However, not too simple, but simple enough that a person understands exactly what your study is about. Okay. So actually, even the types of article titles, there are 13 according to the study done by Hartley. Okay. But just a checklist for you before you are writing your article, or your article title rather, is that it's according to the instructions to authors provided by the journal. So instructions to authors with journal can sometimes have a limitation to the number of characters or the number of letters essentially that you use in your title. So make sure it's according to that. Does it indicate the main theme of the paper? Is it clear, too long, too short? Uncommon abbreviations, like if I'm abbreviating, say, femur neck fracture as FNF. I mean, if a person's reading it, 80% of them won't know, just because I've used this abbreviation as FNF, like people won't know what it is. So don't use unless, like, there are certain common abbreviations like DNA, RNA, TB that you can use, but don't use some abbreviation that you only have, mastered or made. You can also, so some articles these days are coming with pun, irony, or humor. Like the DDH article that I described earlier, the title of that is actually going to be "Who Missed My Hip," because we're talking about which particular stage of the referral process that person's DDH was missed. So you can definitely use that. Your article doesn't need to be super formal. The article title doesn't need to be super formal or anything. but it should not be something, funny or it can be something funny, but it should not be something kiddish, essentially, right? Because this is a professional scientific article that you're publishing, right? Again, when you're determining authorship, who should be first author, who should be corresponding author, should I do ghost or gift authorship? The ghost authorship is basically excluding someone who participated in the work of your study. Gift authorship is someone who did not participate in or including the name. Usually you should avoid either of these things because in the long run, it may not help you, right? So usually what I do is whoever I'm working with, I make sure that before we even do one iota of work on our research paper, they know exactly what their role is going to be in terms of authorship, whether they're not going to be authors, whether they're going to be included in the acknowledgement sections as we had previously spoken about. So that everyone's on the same page. And if they say, okay, hey, like I don't want to work, maybe I work something out with them, or I say, hey, I'm sorry, but this is what it is, right? So just make sure that everything is clear from the get-go. You don't need to do your journal articles alone. I mean, your research alone. You can definitely have some of the other colleagues working with you. So don't, be ki, haan, mera research. And see, like we Indian medical students have a tendency to compete with each other. But research is actually a field where if I am helping someone else with their research, my name would be included as an author in theirs. And if I myself am working on something and they are helping me, I would include theirs if they've done enough to help me, right? So compared to our usual life of NEET and AIPMT and whatsoever we've been dealing with all our lives, where competition and ranking is super important, research is actually a collaborative way for you to get to know, like through your research presentations also, where you go meet your, colleagues at, say, a conference or something. You have to have good relations with everyone because that's how you're actually going to meet them. See, in medical students, you want to win that top prize of paper presentation. But that's really not as important as meeting with another researcher, probably collaborating with them on another research project. That's a much better prize than a silly, first prize paper presentation in any conference, right? So again, what are the keywords that you can possibly use for your article that has to be at the end of the abstract? There's some, again, we spoke in depth about mesh keywords, and you can definitely use those. You can, they have to be specific, right? And don't use any unestablished abbreviations. Like I said, femur neck fracture, don't abbreviate to FNF. Okay. So the importance of abstracts, we're moving to the last 10 slides. I know today has been a little long with this presentation, but it's super important that you all actually understand how to actually write, your paper effectively. And just last 10 slides that we have here, and then we move on to a little more somber things. So the last element to be written, but the first element to be read, right? That's what the abstract is. Like I said, it's 150 to 200 words. That basically summates a whole article, and it's going to be the most common thing that either readers see or reviewers see. Okay, and reviewers can only see the abstract and title before deciding whether to further review the article. So if their abstract and title only does not make sense or is not good enough, a reviewer can decide to just reject the article outright. Okay, it's important for gripping the reader's attention and intrigue, and only title and abstract will always be freely available, right? So if you have an article published in a journal, and if it's not open access journal, then whatever the journal shows is only going to be your journal article. Sorry, it's going to be your title and your abstract that's going to be freely available, and then people will decide whether or not they should move forward with seeing your complete article. Okay, so make sure that these two things you read over again, and you make sure that it's written to absolute perfection. In fact, I usually spend the most times on my abstract and title, just to make sure that it's interesting enough and it is conveying the general focus of my paper. Okay. So good abstract means an interested reader and means more citations, right? Because if people find your article tiresome to read, they will not choose to quote you in their articles, right? Sorry, just give me one second. Sorry about that. So yeah, once you decide your journal, um, so basically how to write an abstract is once you've already made that list of journals that you have, right, your target journals, go to your first journal, go to the first target journal, see the guide for authors before writing your paper, and then again see in the guide for authors, see the abstract that you have, abstract requirements that they have, right? So there's something called a structured abstract, there's something called an unstructured abstract. So a structured abstract is basically where even in the abstract you have to break it down into subsections of background, materials, methods, results, discussion, etc. Right? Some journals require structured, some journals require unstructured, so it's not optional in most cases. But always read the guide for authors 2 or 3 times, the whole guide for authors. It's a long document. I'll show you an example of one today. And just read it 2 3 times before you start writing anything, just to make sure you've met their guidelines. Because if you send it to an editor and if he rejects it just because of bad or no following of their guidelines, then it'll just be a pain to find another journal again, switch to their guide for authors, and then submit again. Then the abstract length is usually 200 to 250 words, so make it concise. Avoid any descriptive long sentences. I used to write sentences that were 17 18 words each, and now I've cut down to maybe 4 or 5 words each, because I've understood that short sentences are the key to a good abstract. Okay. Remember the purpose and motivation of your research. Why should the readers care about it? If you're describing new research methods or results, it's important to succinctly describe the context. Consider thinking about why you found your research interesting and why you decided to study the topic. Okay. When writing about findings, include answers to the problem you set out with. Do not use any vague language, right? Example of a vague statement would be a large percentage of schools in India are found to be negligent in offering sufficient midday lunch meals. Does not really add any value to the reader. Instead of saying a large percentage of schools in India are found to be negligent in offering midday meals, you can say 64% of schools in India are found to be negligent, so that a reader knows exactly what your results are and you're not being vague about what you found, right? Also, do not exaggerate. For example, if it would be wrong to suggest that children in 64% of schools are suffering from kwashiorkor because they're not receiving this midday meal. Okay. But it would be adequate to imply that children in 64% schools of India are receiving inadequate nutrition, right? So how to fine tune your abstract? Basically do a proofread and edit. Look at every single word. Think about whether it's important for that word to be there or not. Usually what I do is I write a 500-word abstract, and then I cut down on words, and then I cut down on sentences, and I bring it down to 150 or 200 words. Then leave it for a day or two. Everyone suffers from writer's block. And once you keep reading the same thing again and again, it irritates you. Leave it for 1 2 days and then return to it. Okay. Rework it 2 3 times, pass it on to a few trusted colleagues, and just see what they say about it, whether they're understanding everything. Because what happens is usually you think, wow, bahut acha likha hai, and then someone else says, oh, I didn't understand this point. Because you are reading the abstract in the context of your whole study, right? So you think that you have put your point across about a specific thing, but that's usually not the case. And just pass it on to 2 3 people who have a basic understanding of what you're studying, and they'll be able to help you out with fine-tuning your abstract. Do notes of abstract. Do not use lengthy background information. You cannot reference to any other literature in article. Instead, you can say something like current research shows that, or studies have indicated that. Here's where you can use these sentences, but nowhere in the rest of the article can you do that without any references. You cannot end with dot dot dot, right? Like we do usually in our WhatsApp messages. Don't end with incomplete sentences or dot 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 just because your word count has decreased. Again, avoid any abbreviations or jargons and terms that may be confusing to the reader. You cannot have any sort of image, illustration, of figures or tables in your abstract. Okay. Last 3 slides, we're going to talk about a little bit about manuscript language. Write direct, short, factual sentences, right? The average length of a sentence, okay, should be around 10 to 12 words. Okay. If it's longer than that, see if you can decrease it. If not, it's fine. Okay. Convey one piece of information per sentence. Don't try to fit in, we saw that this happened, but in this particular group, we saw that this happened. Then in that particular group, we saw that happened, right? Use the present tense for known facts. Past tense is experiments that have been conducted. Use past tense for experiments that have already been conducted, and for results of those experiments. For example, for present tenses, average span of a honeybee is 6 weeks. Okay. But for experiments that have already been conducted, like even the ones that you have conducted, you can say the average life of a bee in our contained environment was 6 weeks. Right. So there's a few technical issues that some students face, and this is basically present tense, past tense. So present tense is for known facts that people know or has been already established. But is there any experiments that have already been conducted? Then you use was, right, or a past tense. Use active voice, because active and passive, I'm sure you guys have all studied in your 10th standard. Active is basically trying to shorten the sentences. So saying, instead of saying that, instead of saying that lifespan of a bee increased in our contained environment is what we found, because that makes it a complex sentence. Just say we found that the average lifespan of the bee increased in our contained environment, right? Remember NUAP, very important. No unnecessary acronyms, please. So don't try to put acronyms that you yourself have made into your research article, because no one else is going to understand them. And trust me, it's very annoying. Even while I'm reading some, some textbooks sometimes, and I have to go back to see where they mentioned the full form of acronym, or I have to Google somewhere that, oh, what does this acronym mean? And then I have to continue reading it. That becomes a little annoying. Eliminate any redundant phases. Some examples of any redundant phases are various modifications of the procedure have recently been developed. So this again is the way that people think research articles should be written. Instead, I would write this sentence as the procedure was recently modified, right? And instead of saying that the compound exhibited competition with the ligand for binding, I would say instead the compound competed with the ligand for binding, right? And instead of saying antibody was added to each individual sample for labeling, I would just say samples were labeled with antibodies, right? And you have to avoid any apostrophe words, like isn't, weren't, aren't, your, or y'all, or whatever it is, right? Because this is not a WhatsApp group that you're sending it to. This is a professional article, right? Always remember, you better check yourself before you wreck yourself. You better just go through your article again and again, maybe 2 or 3 times before you submit it to a journal, before it's actually exposed to the public. You can send it to your colleagues, of course, for their criticism, but it's always better to check whether or not your article is up to the mark according to yourself, and if colleagues around you understand it or not. All right. So if you guys have any questions, please comment below. I'm here to answer them, and then we can move forward to how you can read your paper effectively. Before that, just give me a second. I'm just going to grab a glass of water. Okay, hi guys. I'm just going to go through your questions. NUAP is no unnecessary acronyms, please. It's like a play. I don't know if you guys found it funny or weird. Okay. What is a cohort study? So basically, a cohort is a population that you're studying. Okay, a cohort refers to a particular population. And I promised myself that in this workshop, I'm not going to talk about cohort, case control, and cross section because it really doesn't matter to you. But cohort essentially just think about it as a population that you're studying um, for a particular intervention. Okay. Can you share a few research papers written by you? For sure, I will share them today. And or you know what, you can just you all guys, I've spoken about ResearchGate, right? You guys can just go on ResearchGate. My profile is there. You can see I have a lot of full text articles that are already uploaded there, and you can definitely just see them. How much is research in basic science preferred for publishing? It's not, there's no preference. See, your research should basically just have something new to say. Okay, like I have published research in clinical and preclinical. So like I had earlier said, one of my studies was based on how so this was a non-lab research, this is a review article essentially. Okay, it was based on how microRNAs are involved with um diabetes in hepatitis C. Sounds complex, but it was basically a non-clinical research which I did with one of my friends in the US. And it got published, and it's actually one of the most cited articles that I have, more than even my clinical ones, right? So there's no preference really. It depends on what you like. The only thing is that if you're doing a non or a preclinical research, and you don't enjoy it, you might be stuck in, say, a lab or in a particular setting where you're really not enjoying yourself, and it just won't be as fun to do something clinical if you prefer it, right? What to do once you've published the research? Enjoy yourself, put it on your CV. What else can you do? Where should I approach first for a guide? See, it depends. See, what I would honestly say is where to approach for a guide. Okay, that's the question. What I would honestly say is go to your residents in your college and ask them, "Ki sir, I want to do this research. Which professor do you think is research oriented, and who should I approach?" And they will definitely have an answer for you. Okay, or if not, say, "Sir, can if he doesn't say, okay, no one's doing something, so would you be interested or something?" So don't worry. Okay, just approach whoever is approachable, essentially. Uh, Publish for free. Most journals in India publish for free. Like I said, you can search whatever journal you want through the MAGOJR or whatever that is. I'll share the link today. You can see whatever journal online, simple search, just saying Indian Journal of Dash will definitely give you a result. Then you can, again, I showed you how to evaluate whether that journal is good or not. You can just go to their indexing and see whether they're indexed in PubMed or not. That's how you can see. How to search and choose references for an article. Again, your background literature review will help you with that. You know what the current articles are, what they are showing, how they're different from what you are planning. You can maybe modify your research topic and research question according to what they show, and that's where you get your references for article. So Vancouver style of reference, रुक जा मेरे भाई मैं बोलता हूँ. For a meta-analysis on a particular topic, suppose there are 200 previous experiments done. Do we have to analyze all 200 or is it fine to... Okay, so meta-analysis, right? I would recommend no medical student to proceed with a meta-analysis. So meta-analysis is not like, okay, I am going to pick and choose 15 articles from here, 15 articles from there. And, since 15 articles is a lot, I'm just going to say, hey, this is what 15 articles showed. No, it doesn't work like that. You have to write each and every keyword that you used when searching in PubMed or Cochrane or Embase or whatever that you're using is. Then you have to say how many articles you turned up with, how many articles you rejected, how many articles then you did a thorough analysis of, and you can't do it yourself because you're a medical student, so you can't evaluate whether those articles meet the criteria that is required for your meta-analysis topic or not. So you have to have experts that are doing this for you. Then you can move on to having the statistician actually see the results of that and then compiling it for you through regression. So trust me, meta-analysis is not a one-man's job. Okay, it needs a team ready for publication and stuff. And that's why meta-analysis is actually one of the hardest, and that's why it's the most revered articles, and the least number of articles that are present are meta-analysis and systematic reviews, right? So yeah, you have to, whatever searches you get, you have to explain why you excluded X, Y, B, and stuff like that. Okay. So don't think that it's easy, and just because it's the highest level of evidence, you get a lot of footage for it. Don't do that. Particular method to determine sample size. There's actually a formula for it. We'll discuss it. We'll discuss it for sure. It's basically, it depends on your previous studies as well. So there's something called a power of a study. It's 1 minus beta, and then there's something called alpha, and then you have to adjust it accordingly and then come to a sample size. So it's actually not supposed to be our job. Okay. So you are using the level of significance. So essentially what a sample size entails, okay, the level of significance that you're using. Usually the level of significance that we're using is 0.05. But most of you all don't know what p-value is also. So I'll talk to you about it. Let me come back to it. H-index. H-index is basically, it's basically on, see, like on Instagram, you have followers, right? And it determines how influential you are. An H-index is the same thing for an author, okay? An H-index is basically the number of times that the articles written by this particular author have been cited in other articles. It's essentially like an Instagram follower number that you have. The higher, the better. Okay, that's what H-index is for. Like a journal has an impact factor, authors have an H-index, right? PubMed is not a journal. PubMed itself has around, I think, 12,000 journals. So you can definitely, if you cover whatever's in PubMed, I mean, hats off. Should we contact any journal? No, you don't need to contact any journal before you start your research. Just go on their page, and no, even after, you should worry about journals only after you finish your research. Okay, after you finish your research, you go on their page, see how they want their article to be formulated, and only then is when you approach. Like, you don't need to approach journals, you just see what they want. Like, you don't need to approach journals on any step of your research process. Okay, I rejected it. Review articles on pediatric journals. I rejected it because it was not right for me to sit and review them. Yeah, so that's what. So you have to be honest. See, I could have accepted, and I said, okay, hey, like, I'm a reviewer for Indian Pediatrics, Indian Association of Pediatrics journals and stuff. But I forthcomingly said, and I told them, sir, I'm just a medical student, and should I review this? And they said, yeah. But then I think one article I reviewed and one article I rejected because completely out of my scope. Yeah, so that's what happened. Yes, you can become a part of research projects if you're not studying and working in any hospital currently. You can just write that you're an independent researcher, and you can move forward that way. You don't need to be affiliated to any particular institution to start studying. I mean, start working on research. How to validate questionnaires? You see that it has experts that have commented on its validity, and also you've conducted some sort of pilot study where the results you have found confirm its validity. Okay. Funding for research. See, honestly, I personally have not received any funding for any of my research projects, simply because I don't want to wait too much for funding to come in. And unless you're really going on some high level clinical trial or some, insane project that you're really working on, the funding requirements are really not that high. So yeah, I mean, I honestly, I don't want to tell you that I know too much about it because I myself have not explored any funding sources. And in India, those funding sources anyways are far and few. How many research can one do in a year? I know people who have published more than 30 to 40 articles in a year. These are senior level HODs at international institutions, but there is no limit to how many research papers you can do in a year. As a final year student, should I do research now? You can do research whenever you feel that it's going to help you out. Okay. STS research by ICMR. Okay, that's, I think. Okay, that's, I think, the second last question I'm going to take. So STS research is something that I don't know if you guys are the same people that came on the first day. Something that I had applied for in the first year of my medical college, and it got rejected. And that was actually, I published a paper before that, right? In the 12th, I published a paper, and that's just something I thought I would apply for since everyone was talking about STS and ICMR and stuff. So I do believe that STS to a certain sense helps students with research, but someone could argue that it actually demotivates students from researching because it gives it although it gives a lot of grants, but the number of medical students, simply the number of medical students that are present in this country are so high that they're also not able to allot so much grants for STS. But some people feel that अगर STS हो गया तो wow हम researcher बन गए, and some people feel that अगर STS नहीं हुआ तो shit yeah, my research career is over before it started. But that's really shouldn't be the case, because STS is just one avenue for you to do research. I think the best way to start research is volunteer somewhere or start your own research, right? You learn along the way. Your first research may take you even a year to complete, but you learn so much stuff from it that the next research you do will take only 3 or 4 months, right? So that's my opinion on STS. Good for a few people, good for a bad for a few people, but yeah. And why is PubMed so? So how do people assign students research via PubGeek? So what we basically do is we have a few doctors on our panel, right? And whenever those doctors are working on research projects and they need student volunteers to say collect data or just to go through some data and see if there are any relevant findings, depending on the student's expertise, um, we host projects on our website. Then whoever's registered with us, it's a free registration. Whoever's registered with us can go to that particular project. Once it pops up, they can apply to that project, and either the PubGeek team or the doctor himself or herself will go through those applications, see which student he really wants, and then those two are connected. So that's essentially how it works. So anyways, I'm going to move on from questions so that uh, we actually. So I'm just going to talk to you about how you can filter your um, your papers very quickly, because I understand that you still get a lot of results um, once you're searching for papers. So we're just going to quickly, it's a few minutes ka presentation. We're just going to quickly talk about how to read a research article, right? So first, you're going to basically your questions that you're asking are: is this article important to me? Is this relevant in my research? And should I spend more time on it? Right? These are the basic questions that you want answered. Again, we spoke in depth about how you write an article, and that's exactly how articles are framed: title, abstract, intro, material, results, discussion, conclusion, references, right? Some quick tips. Read first. So I'm going to talk to you the order in which you should read the article, okay? And it's different from the one in which you write it. So you read the title and the keywords, okay? Then you move on to the abstract, okay? And at each point, you're questioning yourself, is this article meeting the goals of what I want to research in or what I want to study, okay? After the abstract, then you move on to the conclusion, see what the article is concluding. Then you go to the tables and figures, see the data that they're using, so that, this whole schema prevents you from wasting time on one particular article where you're reading from intro, then metros and all. That's not important. I mean, that's not important. Nahin, that's not required when you're just scanning through an article. When you're reading it in depth, you can definitely go through all of them. So read title, keywords, read abstract, then read conclusions, then you go to tables and figures, then you move on to the introduction, right? After introduction comes the results and discussions, and then comes the materials and methods. Okay, so if anyone wants, they can feel free to take a screenshot of this. And this is actually just the way that you should definitely read an article, because once you read the title and keywords, you see, okay, is this article really important to what I'm trying to study or what I'm trying to read from this? Then I read the abstract and say, okay, maybe this is something that I can use. Then conclusion. So at each point, you're asking yourself, hey, is this article aligning with what I'm trying to study or what I'm trying to know about before I start my own research, right? So those were some quick tips on how you can actually do your research. I mean, how you can actually read an article. I'm going to quickly just talk to you about some basics and statistics that we use as part of research, so that makes it easier for you to read your articles. Okay. So statistics is basically used at every stage of the article cycle, okay, for planning, designing, collecting. So my advice would be to approach a statistician before you even start your article research process. It's basically, as you all may know, it's math formula, allow you to combine your data. It gives you information, right? So without statistics, we would just be looking at rows and rows of information like in this Excel sheet. Okay. It would make no sense to us. Where it prevents you from looking at individual results and allows you to interpret your results. Even the mean median mode that you use, that we're so familiar with since 10th standard, that's also part of statistics only. Okay. And it ranges from this simple mean or average to a complex regression analysis. And people actually do PhDs just in statistics, right? So it's not something that you can master in a day or a year or even 2 or 3 years. It requires actually a lot of time before you master this particular science. Just talking about the basic types of data that are there: quantitative and qualitative. Okay. Qualitative is something like color of eyes is brown, or black or blue or whatever it is. Okay. Or hair is long, hair is short. Quantitative is quantitative basically means numbers, right? That's what quantity means. That's what quantitative means. And they can be further divided into categorical, ordinal, and scale. Okay. And we're going to talk a little bit about what each is. So scale data can be of two types. Okay. Scale means it's on a scale. Just imagine that. Okay. It can be either continuous or it can be on interval. So continuous is something like your blood sugar level. It can be 143.2, it can be 110.9, it can be 121.2. So it's on a continuous scale where there are no, you know, equal intervals between two values. Now you might say that it will be 0.1 in this case, but it can it can be 143.23 also, right? So yeah, that's what continuous means. Now interval means something like age, right? Age can be only 34 or 35. Usually in your studies, you're going to include that. I know you'll say, okay, it can be 35.4 depending on month. No, but usually you say 34, 35, or your pulse, it'll be 72. It can't be 72.5. It can't be 72.8 or something. So where the integers are present, basically what you're measuring is measured through integers, where there are no decimal points involved. It's called an interval. But where usually there are decimal points involved, it's called continuous. Okay, this is scale type of data. And there's something called ordinal data, means that it's ordered. So suppose I ask you today, how much do you like this course? Okay, I want to do a study on the place. Suppose you're from Rajasthan, you're from Punjab, and I want to do a study on which states like this course more. Okay, so I'll give you a scale saying, first I'll ask you a question, which state are you from? And then I'll ask you, rate this on a scale of 1 to 5. Okay. Now this 1 to 5 is ordered. So if someone scores 1, someone scores 2, someone scores 3, it's in an order, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not 1, 4, 3, 2, 5, nothing like that. It's in order. And that's what's called ordinal data. Basically, it means that what you are testing or what the outcome measure that you're using is ordered. Okay. Then comes the nominal and categorical data. Okay. Nominal or categorical basically means, are you male or female? Or if I ask you, do you like this course? Yes or no? That's what categorical means there are categories, but it doesn't matter if you're male or female, like there won't be 0 to 1, right? Like suppose if I ask you, okay, let me think of an example. What color of shirt are you wearing today? That can either be either qualitative or it can come under category also. It can be pink, blue, red, stuff like that. Okay, so that's the example of categorical data where there is no really order to it. Like males are not better than females or females are not better than males. I'm not talking philosophically, I'm just talking about science today. So those are called categorical or nominal data. Okay. And then let's move on to the various tests that we use. So the most common test that we actually use is something called student's t-test. And it's actually funny, you think that it's called student's t-test because it's actually student friendly, but the person who invented it, his teacher did not allow him to publish any tests or any statistical papers with their own real name, right? So the person's name was actually William C.D. Gossett, right? And oops, what's happening? What's going on? Uh-oh. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, we're back. Yeah. So the person's name was actually William Gossett, and his teacher did not allow him to publish under his own name. So that's why he used the name student's t-test. It's nothing to do with the student or the person who discovered it is not called student. Anyways, so basically what a student t-test does, it determines whether the mean of two groups is equal, right? If say there are group A, group B, I have divided my study population. Okay. And group A, I'm giving 20 grams of salt. Group B, I'm not giving any salt, right? And then eventually I see the BP of group A is 160 systolic BP, and the systolic BP of group B is 140, suppose. So what the two simple the t-test does is to determine whether this 160 and 140 are actually equal, or is it by chance. Okay, so I'll explain the p-value significance in a bit, but that's what basically it's basically meant to determine whether the mean of two groups is equal or not. So now that this mean you can apply for anything. You can apply for pulse, you can apply for BP, you can apply for age, um, how they're feeling better or not. So whatever it is, it's basically for means of two groups. Okay. Now it doesn't mean that it's universal. You cannot apply this test for any and everything. It's basically a something called a parametric test, which means that the normality assumption has to be met, which means that both all your data has to be in the form of a normal curve um, in your study, which may or may not be met depending on your study conditions. And the samples have to be independent from each other, which means that if I suppose I'm doing a study and I have just one group, okay, group A and group B, and group A has in the start. So if I have just one group in the study, if I just have group A that have 50 adults, okay, a group A in the start has a BP of 150, okay, and in the end, after giving them 20 grams of salt for 1 month, their BP becomes 180. I can't compare the results I found at the end to the results I found at the start of the experiment, okay, because those are actually something called dependent samples. So there are a lot of these complexities involved. You may think that what's the difference, but statistics actually has a lot of complexities involved, which makes its importance even more, and makes the importance of statisticians even more, because you have to abide by certain guidelines. There's numerous tests that you can use. The most common is the student's t-test. That's why I spoke about it. But all these tests have to meet certain guidelines, and you should definitely not just try to use it on your own and publish a paper saying, "Oh wow, I did this test myself," because um, if you don't have any background in statistics, 9 out of 10 times you're going to be wrong. Okay, and people are going to call you out on it, and it's just going to waste more of your time in the whole publication process, right? So it's better to have consult a statistician beforehand. So again, let's move on to the p-value. Okay, it's basically used to determine whether the null hypothesis can be rejected or not. Remember how we spoke about the null hypothesis, where we're saying group A and group B actually don't have any difference between them, right? That's what the null hypothesis was in each of our experiments, that we are assuming that there's no difference between whatever we're studying. So p-value basically, if you all did the homework on day one of studying those 5 articles that I had said, you all must have come across a p-value and may have confused you, right? So p-value basically means that if the BP of this group is 160 and if the BP of this group is 140, is it just by chance that these results are being obtained? Okay, that's what it essentially means, right? Um, okay, yeah, right. So for example, if you have if you roll your dice, okay, um, okay, no. So let's move on to the next example. Okay, consider you're having an argument with your friend. You have your own dice. He has her own die. Okay, you're playing some game, and he complains that no, your die gets six, the number 6 more times than my does. And you say, no, that's not true. Our dice are the same. So that's essentially your null hypothesis, right? That both the dice are the same. Okay. And so now what you do is you roll your die 6 times and your friend rolls his die 6 times. You get the results 1, 6, 6, 3, 4, and 1. Okay, this is 6 times that you've rolled the die, and these are 6 results that you get. But your friend doesn't get 6 even once. He gets 1, 2, 5, 3, 4, 2. Okay. Now, if there was no statistics involved, he would tell you, "Yaar, Anirudh, you are cheating. What's happening? See, I told you, I was right that your dice get six more times than I get." But is this true? How would you find out, right? Um, Basically, this is the role of a p-value, okay? And what it basically does is um, it basically determines whether it's true that your die is getting the number six more times than your friend's die. Okay. So p-value basically determines whether the test basically shows whether the test has been applied to the data, showed the difference due to chance, or is there some other underlying factor? Like suppose it'll basically show, suppose you apply your test and then you get a p-value from that test. Okay. It'll basically show whether you getting six twice in these six rows is just by chance, or is there some special weight that you have used so that it comes on six or not. So basically that's the value of a p-value. Okay. And it basically says that, so the p-value that you get is usually in a decimal number. Okay, the highest you can get is 1 and the lowest you can get is 0.0000001. Okay, so the probability of you getting 6, if it is say it is 0.8, if the p-value comes as 0.8, which means that there is 80% probability that you got 6 just by chance. Okay, and where we find the p-value to be very important is when we're doing these tests and we say it's less than 0.5. So what that translates to, you must have heard p-value less than 0.5, less than 0.5, less than 0. So basically it means that the probability of this event occurring, like the probability of the difference between these groups being there just by chance, okay, is 0.05. Okay, which basically means that the probability of this two groups having some difference just by chance, just because of sheer luck, that somehow younger patients came in the BP with with the decreased BP group or something like that, is only 5%. Okay, that's what we use as our sort of litmus test, that if you are proving something within a probability chance of 5%, it's given that what you're saying is right. Okay, any questions on p-value right now? Have I done enough to explain it to you guys? So yeah, there are some softwares that help you with statistics. They're called SPSS. They're also called R. You can use Excel for your statistics. A lot of softwares are available, but they're usually very complex to deal with. And I would still recommend that you get some sort of statistical help from someone. Okay. How to calculate p-value? Again, this will be done. This will be done through your statistical software. Okay, and p-value is not key. As a calculate as a p-value nahi hota. Each test will give you the p-value. Okay, it's not that I have these two means and I want a p-value between them. Aisa nahi hota. You apply a particular test, which will give you the p-value for that test. Okay, so a p-value is basically a concept, right? You can't apply it as a test on its own. It's basically the probability of this test showing that there is no difference between these two just because of chance as 5%. Okay, it's basically a validity of the test that you're using, essentially, if you think about it. Okay, yeah, so basically it shows that the test that has been applied to the data, it's showing that there is a difference between group A and group B just by chance, or there is some other underlying factor that is causing this. And when there's an other underlying factor now, that's when you as a researcher steps in. That's where you are showing that there is another underlying factor, and that's where my research is, there's difference between these two, and most probably that factor is, say, salt, and that's what it is. Okay. Yeah, so categorical variables. Okay, so there are umpteen number of tests that are different for ordinal, different for categorical, different for scale variables or numerical variables. So I'm still please telling you that don't try to apply these. I'm be very happy if you learn statistics in your free time, but without the knowledge, don't try to apply these statistical tests to your own data and then publish a paper or try to publish a paper that way, because people realize when your statistical methods are not that good. Okay. Some books or sources. So I myself have done a 3-month course through Stanford on basics of biomedical statistics, but that course doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. I honestly, I'm sure if you go to Coursera or something, you'll find a lot of courses that are there. But yeah. Okay, so so why we consider p-value less than 0.05 as significant is because um, it's just something that all researchers have basically agreed to. Is just given in it's basically just agreed to. That's it. There's no reason for saying that zero point 0.5 matlab tum sahi ho. Like there's no statistical reason for saying that. But people just think that if the probability is less than 5%, that this difference that you're seeing is due to chance, then it's not due to chance. Like it's just I forget the term for it, but it's just something that is accepted in the scientific community. There's no particular reason why 0.5 is chosen. Okay. How to search for statisticians? I'm sure if you just so people based in Bombay, Nair has a statistician. If you approach your ethics committee that you're getting approval from, they will usually have a statistician on board. So you can definitely approach people like that. And yeah. So confidence interval again is not something I really want to get into right now, because I just want to provide you a basic overview of what statistics is. And since I actually have to leave for my duty, I have a 12-hour duty today from 8 to 8. And so I don't want to get into the depths of it. So I'd rather discuss the research papers with you guys, so that, because see, most of the time what you're going to do right now is, spend on seeing the different research papers that are there, studying them, and then moving on to your own research. Because as I said earlier, if you're just starting with your own research without having some basic background knowledge, then you will end up wasting your time eventually. So I really want to try to do that before we move on to the depths of statistics, because if I start statistics now, it'll never end. So that's what I want to focus on. So one more point I want to touch on, which is kind of important, is something called a normal curve. Okay, which is basically that you will have the most likely outcome as the most frequent outcome. Okay, so here 7, when you roll your two dice, you'll have 7 as the most frequent outcome, because 1v 1 6 and v2 5 3 4 4 3 5 5 2 6 1 exactly, etc. Right? So the most frequent outcome will be the most probable one. Okay, and the probability will keep decreasing as you move away from the curve. So this is something called a normal curve. It's a bell-shaped curve where the center or the mean median mode, they actually coincide. So this is something called a normal curve. This is a normal distribution. Okay. So when we're talking about a 95% 95% class interval, right? So if we have, let me see if you can see this. Right. So if your results are basically based here, okay, the software will basically see if you get this as a result for mean BP. Okay, if this is your mean BP, then the software will basically see your variation in your results. Okay, and what it will do is basically it will see where your 95% lies. So if you guys add this up, okay, 34 plus 34 plus 13 plus 13, if you add the decimals as well, it comes to 95. Okay, so through the variation that is present, so suppose this curve is basically made of individual results. Okay, so someone here whose BP will be someone here whose BP will be 145, someone here whose BP will be 150, someone here whose BP will be 160, 170, 180. See, that's what I'm saying. So as you move on from 170 to say your BP will be 200, the chances of you finding with someone with BP 200 are very low, right? Same here. So suppose this is 160, this is very 150, 140, 130, 120, 110, 100, and the odds of you finding someone with a BP of 90 will be super low, right? So this table basically shows the distribution of the findings that you have. Now, the 95% class interval that we usually speak of, it assesses the variability, the statistical software assesses the variability of what you have, and it determines what would your results otherwise be if you had possibly taken a different population. Okay, so you maybe don't need to understand this much in depth, but it basically means that if you had done the study another time, okay, if you had repeated the study in another place or in another time, or say 2 years hence, okay, in 95% of the cases, you would get your mean between, say, 90 and 200. Okay, this is what the 95% class interval essentially means. Okay, suppose right now your mean, sorry for the bad handwriting, but if your mean right now is 160, okay, and if your 95% class interval is 90 to 200, okay, it basically means that if you had repeated your study again, even in 1 week or 2 weeks or whatever, your mean would come between 90 and 200 in 95% of the cases. Okay, that's what that 95% um, confidence interval essentially means. And yeah, so that's essentially what statistics is all about. Okay, so now I'd love to take this last 5 minutes of our conference and talk to you and just show you a research paper that may help you with, let me just find one of my papers. Uh, 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 right. Okay. Where is it gone? Sorry about this. All right. So let's go to, okay, I'm going to show it to you. Show this one to you guys. Are you guys able to see this? So that's a delay.
Yes, sir, we can see.
Just, they can see it, right? On the
Yeah.
YouTube feed as well. All right. So this is, let's see, I'm just seeing the YouTube feed if they can read it. Yeah, they can. So this is basically a study that I did with a person from, two people from the US. And it's basically regulation of insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes by Hep C virus infection. Okay. Basically, it's, if you can see, the article title is not very misleading. It basically says regulation of insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes by hepatitis C virus. Okay. A driver function of circulating microRNAs. Okay. As you can see, the abstract is a small abstract. It's 200 words. It's currently published in the Journal of Cellular and Molecular Medicine, right? As you can see here, right? And yeah. Oops, I need to clear that. Anyways, so here's a small abstract that you'll have to write for your article. And this is actually quite a complex topic that we had picked up. So it's okay to, if your study is actually complex, it's okay for you to have complex abstracts and complex this. But as you can see, the title of my article is relatively simple, right? So basically, we talk about how it's a serious worldwide health issue. It's associated with various liver diseases, including HCC. How are the relations? So now we're talking about the novelty of our study. How are the study on relationship between HCV and development of insulin resistance and diabetes very limited? So how we've seen that, in the previous searches, we saw that it's very limited, right? So that's why we're doing this. Then we move on to current research has shown blah, 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 blah. More studies have emerged recently on correlation of la, la, la. However, no studies have been carried out to directly address if these microRNAs, especially circulating microRNAs, have any causal effects on the development of insulin resistance and diabetes, right? So we have essentially said where the study is limited. Then we have gone on to speak about what the current studies show, then what are the gaps present in today's literature, and how we will be addressing these gaps by, we propose a new perspective that circulating miRNAs can perform regulatory functions to modulate gene expression, right? So this may be a little wordy for someone, so let me pick out a different article because that article goes on for, I don't know, 15-20 pages. So let's go to a simple one, right? Yeah, let's do this. Okay, so this is a relatively simple article that I'd written with Dr. Neil, who you saw on the first day of the conference. He was invited for this review in the Indian Spine Journal, and he asked me to write it, and that's why I'm the first author here. He very graciously asked me to be first author here. So again, see the paper highlights, I directly move on to the paper highlights the current status of MIS with special attention to the learning curve, cost effectiveness. So I'm directly just talking about, what this paper is highlighting, because minimally invasive surgery in spine deformity is such a common thing that, it doesn't need so much background information. But as you can see, in contrast to the microRNAs that we were talking about, since a lot is not known about it, we had to include a little background information about it, right? So here people know, whoever's reading, that I don't want to explain what minimally invasive surgery is. We basically, because it's a review article, we were also focusing on the different types of evidences we found and the current status of minimally invasive surgery for correction of adult spine deformity. So that's another example. So I'm sorry, I'm just skipping ahead with this. If you guys want to read it, y'all can definitely go to my ResearchGate page. And y'all can definitely just go through any articles. And if y'all need some full text or something of any article, do let me know. I'll be happy to provide them. Again, this is an article that I published with Dr. Neil again, and it's got a lot of people on there. But as you can see, like Dr. Neil and I worked on it. Mostly both of us worked on it. So as you can see, both of us are the first two authors. And again, see, so this is an example of a structured abstract, right, that I was talking about. So the abstract itself, as you saw previously, it was just a paragraph, the abstract. But here, the abstract is divided into different types of study design, objective, methods. Now this we did not do because we wanted to do it. We did it because it was a journal guideline, right? And yeah, so this is one of the articles that we had. We basically did a survey on how much minimally invasive surgery is being used by surgeons all over. Again, we used the tool SurveyMonkey, as you can probably see here. And this is the type of image that we used for assessing. But yeah, essentially, that I think provides a good enough background for you guys. And if you can just go to ResearchGate, see whatever articles you need, and write me a message there saying, so we need this article, and I'll be happy to send it to you. But there are a lot of full text there as well. And I think that brings us to the conclusion of this conference. Thank you so much, SNO Chattisgarh, for organizing this. Thank you so much for giving me creative liberty to do and do exactly what topics I wanted in the way I wanted them. And thank you guys for attending this. For those of you who haven't joined the PubGeek groups yet, or haven't liked the SNO Chattisgarh page or the PubGeek Instagram page, or haven't subscribed to both our YouTube channels, please do so. We bring to you free workshops and free events. So we hope that you will also in turn help us in establishing a good reputation for all medical students. We are working on a few research topics for COVID-19 through PubGeek, and therefore, if you guys want to either follow us through our multiple social networks, or you want to register on PubGeek.co as well, www.pubgeek.co. You can register yourself for free, and we'll be more than happy to help you with any future projects. And if you have any questions for me, I'd prefer it if you email me, because I get a lot of texts from hospitals and stuff which I have to keep up with. So if you guys can just email me at ani@pubgeek.co, I'm just gonna write it in the comment section. You can use that as an email. So thank you guys for attending this workshop. Thank you, SNO. Please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please do like my Instagram page. Please do join the WhatsApp group for PubGeek. And thank you guys. If you have any questions in the future, next week we might have another conference with IMA Students Wings in Maharashtra. So if you guys want to join in, there'll be a lot of more speakers there. It'll be free again. So if you guys want to join in, you can definitely do that. Again, thank you, SNO. 1,400 registrations is no joke. It's the largest workshop that I have an honor of being a part of. So really, thank you, Devesh. Thank you, Yashnaseni. It's truly been an honor to be with you guys.
Thank you so much, sir. We are very honored to have you as our speaker, and it won't be possible without your help. As you know, we went through so many things in the
Yeah,
past.
yeah,
Thank you so much for being with us. We know you are having a hectic duty, and
yeah.
apart from
I'm
that, you
off
are
to
taking
12
out,
hours of duty now.
yeah, more than
Yeah,
2 hours. Like, you
yeah,
need to prepare and also sit with
yeah. To
us.
get some food ready.
So,
Yeah.
so
All
much
right.
of
I
effort.
hope to host many more conferences with you guys. It's been lovely working with your whole team. These guys at SNO, they may not be as big as IMA right now, but trust me, they will catch up very soon. They really got a dedicated team behind them. And really thank you everyone for being part of this. Again, reminder to please subscribe, please like our Instagram and Facebook handles. As we've really worked hard to bring this to you free. We faced a lot of issues the first few days, and both our organizations have really worked hard to bring this to you free. Thank you so much, guys. Take care.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Hello, hello. Just sorry, one this thing I'm gonna make, since there was a lot of requests, I'm gonna make these 5 days of the workshop available to all students who have registered for 5 days. Within those 5 days, I would still request you not to download these videos, because we are just providing this content for free. So we have copyright on it. So we prefer if it is kept online and we get that sort of recognition that we need from this. So I'm going to keep it open for 5 days for all you guys who want to see the content again, see the lectures again. It won't be possible to share the lecture presentations with you because, again, they're our own content, but you can definitely see the videos again in these next 5 days and go through it. Ask me any questions that you have. All right. See you guys. Take care.
Yes.
Lovely 5 days. Hope to do this again really soon. Bye.
Thank you so much, sir.
Bye.